Okay, ever feel like, really mastering English, it's just like this distant dream.
Yeah, it
I
does.
see those ads, those promises, learn English in 30 days. I mean, come on.
Yeah, totally unrealistic.
Yeah, it sets us up to be discouraged. I think that's where this 5-minute English trick gets interesting. We're going to dive into that.
All right, let's do it.
It's from this book, The 5-Minute English Trick, Improve Your English Daily. We're going to look at, can tiny efforts, little things we do consistently actually get us to fluency?
Yeah, because I think that's a really big question a lot of people have. Can you really make progress that way?
Right. So the book starts by looking at why big, ambitious study plans usually fail. It lists 4 big roadblocks. First is overcomplicating things.
I think that's a big one, right? It's like you psych yourself out before you even start.
Yeah.
The book's argument is that we learners get so bogged down in finding the perfect resources or planning these epic study sessions that never happen.
Yeah, and that just makes it feel so overwhelming. And then, that leads to roadblock number 2, procrastination.
Oh, yeah, of course. When something feels huge and complex, our brains just want to put it off.
Right.
You tell yourself, I'll get to it when I have more time.
I'll have more energy
Right.
when things are calmer.
Right, or I'll find the perfect conditions.
But that perfect moment never really comes.
Exactly, never comes.
Yeah, it's like waiting for all the stars to align just to start practicing English.
Mm-hmm.
And the book also calls out this trap. It's like focusing too much on memorization.
Okay.
Drilling vocab lists,
Oh, yeah.
grammar rules, all that stuff.
You feel like you're making progress, but it's not real, it's surface level.
Totally.
Memorizing stuff on its own, it doesn't actually help you use the language.
No, it doesn't. It's like you're trying to learn to cook, but you only read cookbooks, and you never actually get in the kitchen.
Oh, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
Right. You got to actually be in there doing it. And then the book also talks about discouragement. That's the last roadblock. It's just easy to quit when you don't see these big dramatic improvements right away.
Right. I mean, we're all guilty of that, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
We want to see results fast. But language, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, and people get discouraged because they have these crazy expectations.
Totally.
You see those ads fluent in weeks, and you think, oh, I should be there already. But real fluency, it takes time, lots of patience.
Yeah. So this is where the 5-minute English trick comes in. It feels like it completely changes the game.
Yeah, it's a total shift.
Instead of pushing ourselves with these huge efforts that we can't keep up, it's about these tiny habits.
Right, little bits of practice every day, making it so small, it's almost effortless.
And the book uses a gym analogy. They say, if you lift weights for 5 minutes a day, you're not going to become a bodybuilder right away.
No, but over time, you'll see the difference. You'll get stronger.
Yeah, you'll have more stamina.
Exactly, yeah. It's about those little things done consistently. And the thing about language is, it's not just lifting weights. It's a lot of different skills working together.
Right. It's memory, pronunciation, understanding what you hear, even thinking critically in English.
Right. So those 5 minutes have to be used well.
Okay, that's a great point. And I love how the book gives specific activities, 5 of them, to really target all those different skills. And they're surprisingly simple.
Oh, yeah, that's the point. Make it easy so you actually do it.
Makes sense. So the first one is repeating a sentence out loud. Like picking a sentence that's useful and just saying it 10 times.
Yeah. And focus on how you're saying it. The pronunciation, the rhythm, that kind of stuff.
It forces you to actively use the language, right?
Totally. You're not just memorizing words, you're training your mouth to make the sounds,
Right. You get used to the rhythm of how English is spoken.
Yeah. It's kind of like practicing an instrument.
That's a good way to think about it.
The more you do it, the more natural it feels.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. So instead of playing notes, we're shaping sounds.
Right, exactly. And then activity number 2 is listening to a short audio clip.
Okay.
Just a few minutes. Could be anything. A song, a bit of a podcast, even a scene from a movie.
Just immersing yourself in real-world English.
Yeah, and the key is choose something you actually enjoy.
Oh, that's good advice.
Yeah, like a funny podcast or a song that makes you want to dance.
The book even says you don't have to understand every single word at first.
No, it's about getting your ears used to the sounds, the way it flows.
Right, getting used to it.
It's really valuable, especially when you're starting out. Kind of like tuning your ear to a new type of music.
I've noticed that with podcasts in other languages.
Yeah.
Like at first it sounds like a jumble.
Yeah, right.
But the more I listen, the more I start to pick up on things, even guess what they're going to say next.
Exactly. It's your brain. It's making those connections. And then activity 3 is about learning new words but in a different way than just memorizing lists.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Instead of trying to learn a ton of words, they say focus on just 3 new words every day.
Oh, that's much more manageable.
Right. But the key is to use them actively. They say, write a sentence with each new word, put it in a context that makes sense to you.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're not just memorizing a word, you're making a little story with it.
Exactly, yeah. It helps you remember it better.
That makes so much sense.
It's like, let's say you learn the word serendipity. Instead of just saying the word over and over, you could write, it was pure serendipity that I met my friend at the cafe today.
I love that. It's like you're creating a little scene in your head, and that new word is part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so then the fourth activity, this one's a little different. They say write one simple sentence about your day.
Yeah, just one sentence. No pressure to write a whole story.
What's the point of that?
It's about actually using what you've learned. Grammar, words, putting it all together.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't have to be perfect or fancy, just a sentence that captures something you did that day.
Like a warm-up for writing.
Exactly. And then the last one, this one's a challenge. Thinking in English for 5 minutes.
Oh, wow, that sounds hard. How do you even start to do that?
Start small. Don't try to translate big, complex thoughts. Just narrate what you're doing in your head, but in English.
So if I'm making coffee, I might think, okay, I'm grinding the beans, now I'm pouring the water.
Perfect. It's about that inner voice, making it speak English.
It might feel weird at first.
Oh, for sure. It takes practice. But eventually it'll become more natural.
Like training your brain to think in a whole different way.
Yeah, exactly. And once you get comfortable with that, you can start trying to think about more complex things, all in English.
These are really clever activities. I'm starting to see how even 5 minutes a day could make a difference.
Oh, definitely. And that's just the beginning. The book goes into how to turn these activities into habits you stick with, which is really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. But before we get to that, just a reminder to our listeners, if you're liking this deep dive into the 5-minute English trick so far, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the rest of the discussion.
Yes, please do. We'd love to have you follow along.
All right, so let's talk about how to make these 5-minute tricks into actual daily habits. The book emphasizes connecting the new habit to an existing one.
Oh, yeah, that's classic habit building stuff. It's about using something you already do regularly as a reminder to do the new thing.
So instead of just saying, I'll do it sometime today, I attach it to something I already do, like brushing my teeth or making my morning coffee.
Exactly. So you have that trigger, you brush your teeth, then you do your 5 minutes of English.
It's like an alarm, but instead of a sound, it's a routine.
Right, a mental cue.
Okay,
Right.
makes sense. And the book also says it's good to track your progress visually, like using a checklist or an app, or just marking days on a calendar. Seeing those days you've done it, that can be motivating.
Oh, absolutely. It's visual proof that you're doing it,
Like leveling up in a game.
Exactly. It helps you stay on track.
Okay, and then the last thing, the book really stresses keeping things fun and engaging.
Oh, yeah, that's so important. If it feels like a chore, you're not going to do it.
They say you should try different activities, find things you're actually interested in, even make it a bit playful.
Right, exactly. It's got to be something you look forward to.
Like they talk about finding English language content that fits your hobbies.
Hmm.
Like if you love cooking, find a cooking show in English. Or if you're into history, find a podcast about history.
Yeah, so it feels less like work, more like something you enjoy.
This all makes so much sense. It's like the difference between forcing yourself to go for a run and getting lost in a good book.
Exactly, yeah.
One feels like an obligation, the other is pure joy. And that joy, that's what makes you keep doing it.
Exactly. And in the end, that's what leads to real fluency.
So I'm really starting to get how these like really small actions can build up over time. But what I'm curious about is, how does the book see the long-term impact of this? Like, what kind of changes can we expect if we actually stick with these 5-minute things?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. The book actually lays out this kind of timeline of progress, and it's pretty encouraging, I think.
Okay.
Obviously, everyone's different, but it gives you an idea of what these micro efforts can really do.
All right, I'm all ears. So let's say after a month of doing this, just 5 minutes a day, what kind of changes could we see?
Well, after a month, you'll probably start to notice that you're speaking more smoothly, like those 5-minute bursts, whether it's repeating sentences or talking to yourself in English, they start to add up. You get more fluent, more confident.
That's pretty cool. Tangible progress in just a month. What about like 3 months in?
By 3 months, you're likely to see a big jump in how much you understand. You'll be able to follow conversations better, get more out of movies, even those podcasts we were talking about.
So it's not just speaking, it's understanding, too. Makes sense. It's a two-way street, right?
Exactly. And those listening skills, they're super important in real-world situations. Imagine you're traveling to an English-speaking country.
Right.
Those 3 months of practice, they'll really help you out. You can understand directions, order food, even have basic conversations with people.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not just about passing a test. It's about actually using the language.
Absolutely. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. After 6 months of doing this consistently, the book says you start to think about English differently.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What do you mean by that?
You'll probably find that you're thinking in English more naturally. You won't have to translate everything in your head all the time.
Oh, wow. So it's like English becomes less of a foreign language and more like almost like a native language, at least inside your head.
Yeah, kind of like that. It's hard to explain, but it's a real shift.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Think of it like learning a new dance move, right? At first, you're thinking about every step, counting in your head. But then after a while, you don't have to think about it anymore.
It just flows.
Exactly. And it's the same with language. You internalize it. And that's when you become truly fluent.
So those 5 minutes a day, they're literally changing how our brains work.
Yeah, pretty amazing, right? And the book goes on to say that after a whole year of this, just 5 minutes a day, you'll see a complete transformation in your English skills.
A complete transformation. That sounds almost too good to be true.
I know, right? But we've already seen how these small efforts can build up over time.
Right.
Think of it like investing a little bit of money every day.
Okay, yeah.
Over time, that money grows, especially with compound interest.
Those 5 minutes, it's like our daily investment in becoming fluent.
Exactly. And eventually we get a big return on that investment. Of course, this is just a general timeline. Everyone learns at their own pace.
Of course, yeah.
But the point is, even small, consistent effort can lead to really big results.
It's about being patient and celebrating those small victories along the way.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this approach so great. It takes the pressure off of being perfect.
Right. It reminds us that anyone can get there one step at a time.
Exactly. So instead of freaking out about learning a whole new language, we just focus on those small steps every day.
It's like building a bridge, brick by brick.
And that bridge, it leads to a whole world of possibilities. Being able to communicate in English, it can open so many doors.
New friendships, travel experiences, maybe even new job opportunities.
Right. And a deeper understanding of other cultures.
It's pretty amazing to think about, all starting with just 5 minutes a day.
It reminds us that small actions done consistently can have a huge impact on our lives. And that's not just true for language learning.
Right, it applies to so many things.
Absolutely. Whether it's getting in shape, learning a new skill, anything.
It's about realizing we don't have to make these big, drastic changes to make progress. We just need to focus on those small steps, day after day.
Exactly. It's about incremental growth, the power of tiny gains that build up over time.
I love that. And that's a message that really resonates with me.
With me too. It reminds us that we have more control over our lives and our goals than we think. We don't have to wait for the perfect moment to start making progress.
We can just start right now with 5 minutes.
And those 5 minutes can change everything.
Wow. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's really changed how I think about learning languages, and it's inspired me to think about how I can use these ideas in other areas of my life.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, the key is to pick one small action, one 5-minute activity, and just do it every day. Don't worry about being perfect. Just start.
That's great advice. It's about taking that first step, no matter how small it seems.
Absolutely. And from there, you just keep building.
So I think it's time to move on to the last part of our deep dive, where we'll look at some practical tips for actually making these 5-minute tricks part of our routines, making them stick.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
Okay, so we've talked about why this 5-minute English trick works and what to actually do. But what I'm really taking away from all this is like the change in how we think about it, It's not about conquering English. It's more like becoming friends with it, little by little.
Yeah, it's a much more, gentle approach, right? Instead of going all in or giving up, we're allowed to be a bit messy with it, make mistakes, learn at our own pace.
And have fun. I think that's what the book really emphasizes. Traditional language learning, it can feel so strict, so intimidating. You're constantly being tested, judged. This feels more like we're exploring, playing around a bit.
And that playfulness, that's key, I think. When we're enjoying ourselves, we learn better. We're more open to new stuff and we're more likely to stick with it.
It reminds me how kids learn languages, They're not afraid to experiment, make up words, sing along. Even if they don't get all the words, they're just having fun.
That's the spirit we want to bring back, even as adults, that curiosity, that playfulness.
So how do we actually fit these 5-minute tricks into our days? I mean, we're all busy.
That's where those habit building tips come in, right? Like we were talking about before, connecting the new habit to something we already do, tracking our progress, and keeping it fun.
So instead of just hoping we'll remember to do it, we create reminders, those anchors.
Right. Like let's say you love coffee. You could decide that while your coffee's brewing, that's your 5 minutes to listen to an English podcast.
Oh, that's a good one.
Or if you take the bus to work, that's your 5 minutes to think in English. Describe what you see, the people, the buildings.
I like that, finding those little pockets of time in our day.
And don't forget the visual reminders. A sticky note, an app, even just marking a calendar. When you see those days you've done it, it keeps you going.
It's like a little reward. You see how much you've done, it feels good.
Exactly. And then making it fun, that's really up to you. Experiment, find what works.
The book mentions finding English content that matches your interests. Could be music, movies, anything.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference. If you love food, find a cooking show in English. If you're into history, there are tons of podcasts about history.
It's about making those 5 minutes something you actually look forward to, not just another task to check off.
And when you enjoy it, it makes all the difference. It's not a chore anymore, it's a little treat, a mini vacation in English.
This whole approach, it feels so, I don't know, empowering. Like we're in control of our own learning. We can make it work for us.
Exactly. And it reminds us that learning isn't just something we do in a classroom. We can learn anywhere, anytime.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, just this. Think about how you can use these ideas from the 5-minute English trick for other things in your life. It could be learning a new skill, developing a healthy habit, anything you're passionate about. Remember, small efforts, repeated over time, that's how we achieve big things.
That's a great takeaway. It's about believing in those little steps,
Yeah.
even when they seem small. Showing up consistently, even when it's hard. Trusting that it'll all add up in the end.
Absolutely. It's about incremental growth, the magic of compounding. And it all starts with just 5 minutes.
This has been such an inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
It was my pleasure. And to our listeners, remember, the journey to fluency, it starts with a single step. Pick your 5-minute activity and start today. You might surprise yourself with what you can achieve.
Until next time, happy learning.